Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's EnRoute webinar. My name is Bennett. I'll be the moderator for today, and our presenter is Aaron Clapp, Application Specialist at SAI. He knows everything there is to know about EnRoute, and today he'll be walking us through how to create and modify reliefs in EnRoute. After the presentation, we will be able to answer any questions you have, either about reliefs or any other EnRoute topics, so feel free to put those questions in the chat, and we'll answer as many as we can. We are recording the webinar as always, so if you want to review anything that Aaron discusses, we'll be sending you all the link here this afternoon, so look out for that. And that's about it for me, so I'll go ahead and toss it over to Aaron and we'll get started.
All right, sounds good. So let's talk about the basics of reliefs here real quick, and then we'll talk about some different things you can do with reliefs, and we'll go over a couple of the tools, commonly used tools, and just talk some general basics with EnRoute reliefs. So EnRoute relief, or a EnRoute relief, is a three-dimensional type object that's a little bit different than like a mesh. So you can download and acquire 3D meshes from online, and those will actually import differently than what a 3D relief is. A 3D relief is basically an EnRoute coined or an EnRoute specific term for something that it can understand as a toolpathable object. They will always be, by default, represented in yellow. A 3D object, on the other hand, say like an STL or something like that that you might import, will always be represented by default as red. So that's kind of how you can kind of tell the difference. And you can convert a 3D object into a relief. But in this particular instance, we're kind of just going to be building stuff out of scratch from EnRoute. So the first things that we kind of wanted to talk about was when you create a 3D relief, why, what are some of the things you can do and why do they exist and things like that. So first of all, I'm just going to draw a shape here on screen. And this in of itself is just pretty simple. But in order to create a relief, I'm going to go to my Create Relief tool or go to Surfaces and Create Relief. This is going to give me my basic Create Relief tools. And what I want to talk about here first is we've got several different options. We've got a rounded relief, we've got a bevel relief, and we've got a flat relief. These are kind of for creating those really basic shapes, but that can maybe be modified or adjusted later to kind of suit your needs or things like that. So it's a good starting point. And you have a few settings in here for normal, which basically takes the shape of the angle that you give it, or in this case, if I do a rounded relief, it's going to take, if I choose normal, it's going to take the angle that I've chosen and it won't limit the height of the object. I've got an object for constant height, so I can keep the height constant across all objects. So if I say constant height, I want it to be no more than 5 inches or whatever that is. I can also scale it to a specific height. So, there's an aspect of scaling there. And then I can limit the height. So the scaling is going to make it bigger or smaller depending on the height that I make it. And limit to height is then going to actually just chop it off at whatever height that I decide. So let's say I try, let's kind of take a look at the limit to height, because I think that one's kind of probably the more confusing out of the most of them. If I set this to 45 degrees and I only say 1 inch, that's my maximum. I want you to limit the height to 1 inch, and I hit apply. This is what it does. So instead of creating a dome that is all the way to the top, I told it I wanted to limit it to 1 inch, and then it just cuts the relief off there. So that's kind of the difference there for that specific one. Now, one thing to notice about reliefs is I can do several different things. So I can apply a relief to multiple or the same object. So I'm going to take off the preview here for a second, and I'm going to draw another little square or rectangle inside here, another little shape. And I'm going to grab the relief, and then I'm also going to grab that center shape. I'm going to create a relief, and I'm going to create a beveled relief. Maybe we just say normal, and let's just go 25 or something like that. And I'm going to select add and apply. Now let's preview that. And now what it's basically done is it's used this shape to create another object on top of my existing object. So I can stack things. I can use different effects if I want to, stack several reliefs on top of each other to create some kind of a custom shape. It's a really, great way to do that. This kind of leads into this weird example that I have over here sitting on the left. So let's take a look at that real quick and kind of discover what's going on with what I got here. So over here, I have several different examples, and we'll kind of go through each one here. Up at the top, I have this shape here. It's basically two objects that I have put on top of each other. So I created a round shape, and then I just created a bar. And what this is going to allow me to do is kind of explain what the different options under these do. This is kind of an important thing to kind of know what these do, because it can help you create a seamless object or kind of help you merge pieces together if that's necessary, or to help build up a piece. So if you're going to be doing a piece where you need to add several kinds of effects to it, it's going to be important to kind of know what these do. And we'll kind of take a look at that when we do some more practical examples towards the end. So first of all, I've got my shape here. And let's cancel out of this. And when I look at this, and basically what we're going to be doing is to kind of create these shapes down here. We're going to take the two pieces and we're going to merge them together using our merge tool, which is right here. And then we're going to use each one of these options in order to determine a different effect. So first we have add relief, and then we have subtract relief, then we have merge highest, then we have merge lowest, and then we have replace. So let's just take a look at these examples, and we'll go full screen on the perspective here. So I've already done the work of applying the effects, and what we can see is when I did the merge, the add simply added it on top of the existing shape. Pretty self-explanatory. Then when we do subtract, it does the same thing, except for it subtracts it from the relief. So now we have a subtracted piece, right? Now the ones that get interesting are these two here. These are the merge highest and merge lowest. So this is probably not a great example for, there's a little bit of a glitch that happens on the merge lowest, but it still illustrates the principle. But when we do merge low or merge highest, it compares both reliefs, and then it says, okay, where's the highest point in both of those reliefs, and then I'll use that. So obviously, because the bar went underneath and the dome up here is higher, it preserved the dome part. But once it got down below where the bar is sticking out, then the bar is the highest point. So it added it to the relief. So it maintained the highest point between both reliefs. So that's kind of a nice thing to know. Then again, merge lowest basically does the opposite. It takes the lowest point and says, where is the lowest point between these two objects? And I'll preserve that instead. So the bar, when it goes through, this would be the lowest point here. So it preserves that. Again, ignore the glitch. This is not a great example for this particular option, but because it kind of cuts in here. But then it preserved the bar across here because the dome up here was the higher part and this was the lower part. So again, may not seem like it's super important in a kind of an example like this, and kind of out of context, it might not make sense. But when you're stacking layers, it might be more important depending on what you're merging or depending on what you're adding. And more, you may want to maintain some height or maintain the lowest point. Then you have this object here, which is replace. So basically what it did here is it took the bar and just completely replaced the existing relief. We'll actually do an example where we're going to do a replace relief here. So again, we have add, subtract, merge highest, merge lowest, and replace. A good example of where you might use add and subtract, for example, is you might even use add and subtract to create a negative of something. So if I wanted to, for example, if we go back to our little square here, and we'll just make this a bit bigger. If I say add relief or create relief, and I say make a rounded relief, and I say subtract it, and I'm just going to do normal, and we'll do the same here, apply. So what it's done here, and it might be hard to see, it's going to be a little tricky to see, but because of the color, but you can kind of see how it's gone exactly the opposite. So it's created a dome. So if you're going to maybe create something like a plate or maybe a seat or a chair bottom or something like that that needs to be a custom shape, that could be a good way to do that. So that's kind of a little more practical use of what add and subtract might do. So let's get into a little more specific examples of this using some of the tools in EnRoute. And let's just add some reliefs and create some stuff. So let's open a new file here. Here is a couple examples of two tools that we're going to use. One is Sweep to Rails and one is the Chamfer tool. The Chamfer tool is really great for creating an edge or a chamfer around an edge of a pre-existing relief. Sweep to Rails is a really good way to sweep a design over a contour or between two contours and create a larger piece. So this could be anything between, it could be something like crown molding or something to that effect. You could create like a cheese wedge or a wedge style shape if that was something you needed to do. I believe you could also, use this for, any instance where you'd need kind of the same design, but using a profile. That's something else that in 3D you can use to help aid or help to create different pieces of 3D. So in this particular case, we're going to use the same profile, just in slightly different ways. So I just drew this up in EnRoute. I just grabbed a couple lines and then bent them using the point editing tool. So I just grabbed them and stretched them. So I've kind of got like a little table edge here, I guess is what we're going to do. And that's kind of what this circle is. So I'm going to take my circle, and typically with 3D, you always want to start with a relief. You can't really do anything without a base relief. So we're always going to have to start by creating some kind of starting point. Now, that might take several different forms. Some tools, like the Sweep to Rails, they don't require a pre-existing height to work. Some of them, like the Chamfer tool, it's better that you have a pre-existing relief. So let's just say, in this particular case, when we're using the Chamfer tool, I'm going to say add a flat relief, and I want this to be, well, let's see, how tall is our line here? Okay, it's 3/4 of an inch. That's my height here. Might as well just leave that open because I'll probably use it. So I'm going to grab my relief. I'm going to say create a relief. I'm going to say add, And then we're going to go flat relief, and we're going to do 0.75. And I'll leave the resolution at 50 for now. And if I look at this from the perspective view, this will just show me that it's now 3/4 of an inch tall. So it's pretty flat, just in the shape that we had left it. So now what we're going to do is we're going to apply this profile all the way around the edge of this object. Now I've made it a certain, the reason why I've added a little bit of a shelf here is because I want to make a smooth transition between these arcs and this flat top, right? And so when I come back here to my 3D relief, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create that along this edge, and I want to make sure that this transitions off into the center of the table or the center of this piece correctly. So I'm going to grab my 3D relief. I'm going to go into my surfaces, go to relief tools, chamfer. Now you got several different kinds of chamfer tools that you can use here. The one I'm going to use is just the regular old chamfer tool. Okay. And in this particular case, I already have a base relief. So I'm actually going to say, I want to replace this relief because I don't want to add to it and make it taller. I don't want to subtract from it necessarily. I don't necessarily need to merge high or merge low, although one of those might work. I just want to replace what's existing with what I'm going to put into it. So because we've shaped this object, and we're maintaining the height in our relief, in perspective with our contour, that means that it's not going to make anything out of size or anything like that. So I'm going to just leave base at 0. I'm just going to leave miter checked. And then all I have to do is select the chamfering contour for the shapes. Click that. So it highlights. And then I can hit apply or the green check mark. Click on that. And now let's turn on the preview. We'll go into our perspective view so we can see what's happened. Okay, so now we've created a cool little shape, and this might be good for like an end table or something like that. Maybe a lamp table at the edge of a couch or whatever you want to use this for. But now this has gone all the way around. So this is now cuttable. And I could use this to cut on my CNC using a ball end mill or something like that. So just like that, using a profile, we can create something kind of unique. And again, you can do whatever you want with this profile, right? I could come in here and change this however I want. So for example, if I go edit points, right click edit points. Let's see, I could insert a point right here, and then maybe, I could grab these lines and make them, I could do all kinds of things, right? I could specify something specific, or I could be creative and kind of just make something. No matter what I do, this profile will be extracted onto that shape when I run that. Let's look at another example. Now, in this example, I changed the contour just slightly. So in this particular case, I added this little backing here. And the reason why is because with sweep to rails, it usually works a little bit better if you just have a flat relief to start with, and then you use your profile to define how tall you want it to be. So what we've done here is I've just added a little bit of a backing to it. And that's basically all I've done there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start out with this rectangle here. And I'm going to start with my rails. So I just drew these rails. They're exactly the same length. And I'm going to attach them to the sides of this object. So when the object gets swept through, it's going to sweep it right down the middle. So that's kind of what the sweep to rails does. All right, so I'm going to grab this and let's go to our move command here. So I'm going to move relative. Let's do snap to the center of an object. And I'm just going to snap these to, there we go, snap them on there. Okay, so I've got my two rails. They're snapped immediately to the edge of my object here. I'm going to click on this, and this time I'm going to say add relief, and I'm going to say flat relief, but I'm just going to leave everything at 0. I'm going to leave this at normal and then set it to 0. Basically what this does is it creates a flat 0 thickness relief. So there's absolutely no thickness to this particular object. So if I look at it from the side in the perspective, it's literally 0. It's almost kind of like a blank canvas. Think of it that way. It's a blank canvas for us to kind of do whatever we want with. It just doesn't have any thickness to it. Great way to start. And a lot of the tools in EnRoute, a lot of the 3D tools are going to require that you at least have some kind of canvas to work on. You can't have an empty canvas. So that's kind of something to remember when you're working with 3D, when you're using some of these tools, like, for example, the revolve or the spin, extrude, sweep to rails. They all require a base relief to start with. So if you don't know how tall, or you don't really care, you want it to just go based off of your contour, just start with a 0 thickness relief. That's a good way to do it. So we're going to go ahead and click on this. I'm going to use our little shortcut menu up here. Click on sweep to rails. And this one here, I'm just going to say add, because we have nothing there. So it doesn't make sense to do any of the rest of them. So I'm going to say add to the relief. And then we're going to do normal. I'm going to leave height and base at 0 because I don't need a base, I don't think. I've got it covered with my contour here. And then it tells me to select the first rail. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Click the rail, hit next, click the rail, hit next. Basically what we're doing there is we're just choosing the sides, or the two rails in which we want the contour to be drugged down or kind of extruded on as it moves it down. Now it says select the sweep sections. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to click on my contour 2 times, and a little green bar is going to show up. And this just indicates to me where it's going to sweep the contour in between. So if I click it once, click it twice, it indicates that it's connecting these 2 lines, and then it's going to sweep it down the length of these 2 bars. And at that point, I can just hit apply. And now I have my custom shape. So now if I go to top and go to perspective, now I've created myself like a nice little piece of crown molding. So I can do this, and this is a fairly simple shape. I just did a rectangle, but you could also do this with an arc. So briefly, if we kind of look at what that might look like, is I could come in here and say create an arc. Something like that. And then maybe we do an outline of that arc. So let's see here. Do an offset, something like that. Apply, close. And then all we have to do is connect the ends. So I'm going to draw. Okay. Before we do that, I'm going to select this object. I'm going to do another, because I need to create my rails. So I'm going to make a copy of these. And let's go here and just finish this off. And I'm going to use my snaps here to kind of do this. And then I'm going to merge this together to make it a closed contour, because you can't apply relief to an open contour. So we're going to draw. Let's see here. So transform, contour operations, and merge. And now I've got my arc. And so then all I have to do is add a relief, just like we did before, and then line up my sweep sections, which I can do that easily by using the snap tools, and then do the same process all over again, and it would do the same thing on a crown molding type situation, or an arc, or whatever kind of shape. Another really good example of this might be if you wanted to, say, do shaker style doors for like cabinets and stuff like that. That's another one where this comes in really handy. You could create some really cool custom door panels that would go on a door or some kind of cabinet. So for example, let's take our shape here and let's see here. How long was this? This was, I closed my, oops, there we go. It was 2.6537. Okay, that's the width of it. So if we went back here, and will it let me do an inline? That's the question. Will it let me do an inline, an offset? Oh yeah, it will. Great, perfect. So I want the offset to be 2.6537 and apply. And let's, does that look right? No, that does not look right. That's not right, is it? Oh no, you know what? That's right to that point. Okay, sorry here. We need to measure from here to here. So let's that's not the right measurement. So let's break this apart real quick. Get rid of this segment. Okay, now let's measure these two objects now that they're joined together. F2. Okay, that's more realistic. Okay, so 0.8677. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to take some kind of a 3D relief and we want to add it to the top of this panel. So that's obviously wrong. Let's go back in here, create our outline. So transform, where is it? There we go, offset. And this time we're going to do 0.8677. Apply. So here's what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab, kind of like what we did before with that diamond shape. I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to go to surfaces, and this time I'm going to say, let's go to my relief tools and let's go and add a texture to this. Let's go to symmetric textures here, and actually, you know what? I think I like this wood better. So let's do wood or veneer, one of the two. Let's do veneer. And I can define how high I want this to be. So I'm going to add this to my existing relief because I want this to be on top of the wood panel here. And there are no templates on this one, so I'm going to leave it just at the default. And let's just say we want this to be a 1/4 inch tall. We'll do that and hit apply. All right, now let's take a look at what we got. And just like that, we have kind of a cool looking well, I mean, it's a little bit deep, but again, you probably play with this and make this look a little bit cooler. But now I've created a kind of a seamless transition between this wood texture and the edge of the table. Now, what I could do is maybe inset that a little bit and maybe make that something. So that would be interesting to do as well. So, you know, that kind of adds a little bit of effect there. Now, let's go ahead and take this one step deeper. All right, let's just say I want to type up some text. We'll go ER for EnRoute. And let's hide our reliefs here. I'm going to actually just delete this stuff here just because it makes it a little bit quicker on the response times. And I'm going to put this right in the center. And I'm going to make it big. All right. And I'm going to convert this text to outlines. So convert to curves. And let's just say I want to, again, we're going to add this. So let's get rid of that line. We don't need it anymore. Let's center these objects. That's what we should do. Align to centers. There we go. All right, so now there's two ways that we could approach this, right? So let's just do the first one. So let's do an add. Let's just do add to relief. We're just going to add a flat relief. And we want to say, actually, no, let's merge highest. And how tall is our relief so far? That's going to be important to know. So our current depth is 1.001. 001. Interesting. Okay. So we're going to grab this, add our relief, add height of, let's just say 1.5, 1.25. Let's not go that high. There we go. And I'm going to hit apply. Close. And let's take a look. Whoops, I guess I got to turn my preview on. There we go. Okay, so if I add it, here's something interesting that's happened, is that it's added, it simply adds to the existing relief. So it actually transferred this relief to the existing letters. So I didn't even have to do anything extra there, and it just added those on there for me. Now let's go back. Let's do the same thing again, except for this time, when we add the relief, let's choose merge highest and apply. So it kept the same settings as before. So now, because I didn't add it, there's my 0.25. And so now I've got a nice, clean edge to this, right? And these letters stand out real nice from the edge of the piece. So this is a really good way to do this, and you can kind of get the idea of where I can start creating some custom pieces based on different things within EnRoute, and it all kind of stems from kind of understanding what I can do with these things and kind of understanding these settings here. So that's kind of the basics of working with EnRoute. There's a ton of different tools in here that you can use and different effects. So if we go in here, we've got these tools that we talked about. So you can extrude, you can spin, or you can revolve. So revolve is really good if you're using a lathe or something like that that we on your machine. So we've got revolve options. And you have your chamfer tools, and then you have your textures. There's all kinds of stuff in here. For example, in the wood textures, we've got all kinds of stuff in here that you can adjust, and each one of these will adjust the preview here. So I can increase how much twist or power there is, and it'll kind of give you some different things here. I can increase the spacing of the granules. I can do changes to this, and again, sometimes it's not super obvious, but we should have some wood templates in here. So I'm actually kind of surprised that we don't. So I've either accidentally deleted my templates, which I wouldn't be surprised that that's possible. I probably accidentally deleted them somehow because I do a lot of testing on the EnRoute. So I might have deleted them, but there should be some templates in here that you can use for different wood textures and things like that. Then there's a lot of different things in terms of aligning reliefs, things like that. We'll talk about aligning reliefs probably in our next session next month. We're going to be talking about how to toolpath reliefs. I believe that's what the next session is, and we'll talk about why you need to align the reliefs to certain positions before you toolpath and things like that. Here are the mesh tools. Here is some of the tools that you can use to modify or create meshes. So, for example, I can create a mesh of this object. Let's just go to our top view here. And I can create a mesh from contours or mesh from relief. And what this allows me to do now is allows me to take this custom thing that I've created, I can now export the mesh as an STL and somebody else could use it. So let's say they want to 3D print it or something like that. Now they could go and do that with, and it's still processing here. So this is kind of one of those ones that may take a minute. But now I can take this and send it to somebody else, and they could either 3D print it or 3D model it or bring it into their software in case they want to do something with it, or whatever that looks like. So question is it done? No. Oh, there it is. Okay, just finished. All right. Getting a little impatient. I know. Oh, what happened here? Oh, you know what? That's funny. All right. Well, I guess I should have. I forgot to remove my. I forgot to remove my E and R behind there, so it created a mesh relief of the E and the R just by itself. Well, that's not really helpful. But anyway, so we get the idea. Now we could take that and we could export it, and maybe I'll do that here real quick while we answer some questions. So I know there's a lot to cover on here in a little half-hour session, but if you have any more questions, I also have some additional webinars that we've done in years past, and there's a bunch of 3D resources on our YouTube channel, so check those out. I've done a ton of stuff. We've had other people who have done some unique stuff, so check out our YouTube channel, and there'll be a ton of resources on that as well. So any other questions while we let this process here? Looks like Reynold Gutierrez says, what kind of tools for a CNC router can I use? That's actually a good question. For this kind of cutting, you're going to want to use a ball end mill. And that's mainly because there's a lot of curved edges and little details that you're going to want to capture. The smaller the bit, the longer it's going to take to cut. But the more detail you get, so you kind of have to weigh the pros and cons versus how much detail you want versus how much cutting time you want to save. So there's kind of a balance there. One of the things that you can do, and kind of wish I wouldn't have started this processing thing, but one of the things you can do is you can go under. Let's see, is it under setup? Yeah, under machining, sorry. And you can simulate 3D. And what the simulate 3D is, once you have your toolpath applied, you can kind of play around with, different bits and stuff like that to kind of see how it's going to come out. So let's say you're like, well, I've got this 1/4-inch ball nose, and then the only other one that I have is like an 1/8-inch ball nose. So obviously that 1/8 is going to take a long time, but you're curious to see what the difference would be between an 1/8 and a 1/4-inch ball mill. Well, you could actually toolpath it with the 1/8, process it with a simulate 3D, see what it does, see how it interacts or what it does, see how it looks, and then try it with the 1/4-inch ball nose and then see how it looks. If you think it actually looks pretty decent and you haven't lost a lot of quality or a lot of detail, I would go with the higher bit. Now, if you're asking, I've kind of gone way off on this question, I think, but if you're asking which company to buy tools from, there's a lot of different companies that you can purchase tools from. One of them that we partner with or that we've partnered with in the past is X-Edge Tools. And so I don't know if you're familiar with them. They make really good tools. In fact, I think we even have a custom tool library / feed rate set up for a lot of their tools. So we've done some of that in the past for them. So that might be worth checking out, X-Edge Tools. Their website, I think, is xedgetools.com, or if you search it on Google, that it'll show up. But
Question we had from.
But there's all kinds of different manufacturers out there. So, I mean, that's not the only one. That's just the one I'm familiar with. In fact, if you go to the trade shows, I know IWF is coming up here this summer. If you go there, you're going to find tons of tooling manufacturers there. So there's a lot of them. So, I mean, and a lot of them have, different benefits, and they make different kinds of tools. So I would probably just do, you might talk to your local dealer or your local supplier and see what they got, or maybe even check with your machine maker and see who they would recommend, because sometimes they work with specific manufacturers and stuff like that.
Craig's asking, could I cut double-sided objects? Aaron, not sure if you
I'm
can hear
going to
me.
shut down EnRoute here in case we have a question that requires us to actually have EnRoute open here. Okay, Laguna might have a list of suppliers. That's good. That's good.
Yeah, we did have a question. Craig asked, could I cut double-sided objects?
Yes. Now, the tricky part about that is going to be here. We'll pull EnRoute back up here. So let me just show you a quick example of what happens when we try and kind of the limitations of EnRoute. So there is a way that you can do that. And basically, it means you're going to have to cut the object in half if you can. So here's a good example of this. Let's create a primitive object. And we'll just do a torus or donut. And that's fine. The quality here doesn't really matter. This is an STL relief, by the way. So this is kind of an example of what an STL is going to import like. So we can see here that I've got a rounded shape on both sides. Now, what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to do this kind of a real quick way here. So I'm going to convert this to a 3D relief. So we'll just make this here a little bit tighter. And I'm going to start with a relief. And I'm going to say add and 0 height, 0 base, apply. So I get that paper thin. And I'm going to move this up a little bit so that it's above our material. And then I'm going to say surfaces, mesh tools. Let's see here. No, it might be apply mesh to relief. So we're going to apply this mesh to this relief. And we're just going to say add and apply. And close. Okay. So now that I've created the relief, you'll see here what happens. EnRoute won't allow you to create an undercut. So in this particular case, I would need to change the way I do my design in order to cut this. So what I would have to do is let's delete the relief. Let's go back to our donut shape here, and let's move it back down to where it was, about halfway. And then we would do the same thing. And again, this is a really kind of basic example, but it kind of gets the point across, I think. Surfaces. Oh, I got to have both selected. Can't have just one. Oh, I skipped a step. Got to have a relief. See, it doesn't work. Okay, getting ahead of myself here. So relief tools, apply mesh, and then apply, then close. Okay, so then what I would do is with this particular object, I would just have to cut it twice. So I would cut it on my CNC twice, so half on one side, half on the other, and then I'd have to put the two pieces together. Or depending on how you were doing it, so for example, let's just take that table example that I had up for a second ago when we were talking about the earlier, right? Let's say I wanted to have a cut that went underneath it. Well, that would be easy to do. You would just do the chamfer on the top side, and then you'd copy that entire thing, and then do the same thing, but with a contour for the bottom side. So basically, you'd create one contour, split it in half, take the bottom side of the contour and chamfer it to one side, and then take the top side, chamfer it to another object. And then what you could do is you would line up your part into a corner, for example. You would have to, set up some kind of jig or some kind of a set up where you confine the piece so that when you flip it over, it puts it exactly in the same location. So, and that might be dowel pins, or maybe you screw something into the spoil board so that you can shove it into the exact same spot where it was, or something like that. And then you'd cut the top, flip it, you'd move this piece out of the way, and then bring your other piece that had been chamfered for the other side, and then put it in the exact same location, and then run the cut again. So you can do something like that to a limited degree. You just have to understand that when you're doing reliefs and stuff, it won't allow you to do an undercut because it's a 3-axis style program. So those are some limitations that you'll find. So for example, if you cut any kind of 3-dimensional object like a dragon, or some of the kind of 3D object you import into the software, there will be, if there's any details that go behind, when you convert that into a relief, those details will get lost. So just kind of know that, ahead of time. But yeah, it can be done. There's definitely ways of doing it. It's just mainly the biggest problem is going to be alignment. You're going to want to make sure and figure out some kind of alignment process so that when you flip it over, you're in the exact same XY as you were before. Because if you're off just by a little bit, your whole cut's going to be wrong. So that alignment's going to be a big key factor there.
Okay, great. I'm not seeing any more questions in the chat. If you do end up having a question that you think of afterwards, you can add it to the YouTube video of this recording, and we'll try to get them answered there for you. But we'll go ahead and close it out for today. Thank you all for joining us for this EnRoute webinar. Our next EnRoute webinar will be about applying toolpaths to 3D reliefs. So it'll kind of be a continuation of this one. That'll be a month from next month on April 12th, and we hope to see you there. We'll have the link to sign up for that in the email with the webinar recording that you'll receive later. Make sure you're subscribed to our newsletter so you won't miss out on any webinars or other announcements, and you can sign up for that on our website. Thanks again for being here. We hope you learned something, and we'll see you next time.
Have a good one.